Hey addicts, welcome back to another Addicted Fishing video. I'm Nick Popov, and today we're going to be talking bobber fishing for fall Chinook. So we're going to be talking about bobbers and jigs, bobbers and baits, the type of water you want to target. If you guys are new to this channel, make sure you go down here and give us a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, share this out to your friends and family, and stay tuned, it's coming at you right now. All right guys, as far as the rod and the reel goes, I'm gonna go over it very quickly and just show you the basic setup. You can use a spinning reel. The only thing you really wanna do is have a rod between 9 and 10 feet, 9 and 10 and a half feet. It doesn't matter what it is. The longer the rod, the better you're able to pick up line, which I'll go over. So spinning rod works, or a level line rod works. It doesn't matter. It's all preference, and if you're new to fishing, I would recommend probably starting with a spinning reel. And if you've been fishing for many years and you're comfortable with a bait casting style reel, that's what I'd start with. So 9.5 to 10.5 foot rod, a nice reel with plenty of line on it, spinning rod or bait casting rod. All right, let's get into the setup. So for a bobber setup, guys, the most important thing to start with is your bobber stop. There's many different types. There's rubber bobber stops, like that's on this rod here, these two little black rubber bobber stops, or there's the braided line bobber stop, which ties around your line. Now this is what's gonna be setting your depth. So it's super important to have a good bobber stop on there that's gonna stay fixed so you can adjust your depth accordingly. And once you figure out where those fish are sitting, whether they're low in the water column or high in the water column, you can adjust your bobber stop depth. Then going down to a bead. So I have a bobber stop bead. Now this bead is just gonna push tight against my bobber stop. And then the corky is just to sit up as an identifier. So basically this is like an insurance policy for bobber fishing. Because sometimes you're gonna make a long cast and your line will get all wrapped up and tangled, and this corky will be floating sideways or floating on top of the water away from your bobber. If you see that, you know that your cast got tangled, and that's the whole reason I put that corky on there. It's just a quick insurance policy, so I know if I got tangled when I make that cast. Because it should sit, when it's in the water floating properly, it should all sit sunk down together like that. But if it's tangled, it's gonna be kind of wrapped up, and your corky will be floating sideways more or less. So then I go down to my float. Now, floats are real important. There's all different styles of floats. There's different weights of floats. It's all gonna be dependent upon what depth of water and what type of current you're fishing in. You know, low clear water, you could go as low as a 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce. But in high water, typically what we're fishing for fall Chinook, you're gonna want a bigger bobber, 2 ounce, 1.5, one, anywhere from 1 to 4 ounces. I've seen guys use 5 and 6 ounce bobbers for real heavy current. So that goes down to my 3-way swivel. So after your bobber of choice, I put a little bead there just to buffer the knot. And then I go down to a 3-way swivel. Now this is where it kind of differs between types of setups you can use. And I'm gonna show you 2 different types. So this is gonna be your fixed style float, and I just throw a little lead dropper on there, because if I get hung up with this lead, I can just break the lead free and I don't lose my entire setup. So this is also kind of an insurance deal here for me, is if I break off this little piece, if I get hung up with my lead, this little piece of line breaks and I don't lose my entire setup. All I gotta do is tie on another dropper. And then that goes down to my hook, okay? So this is gonna be for my bait rig here, and I'm just running a 3 to 5/0, depending on the water clarity and height and fish, and I'm just running a 3/0 hook on this one and about a 3-foot leader. So as you can see, I run fluorocarbon. I don't think it's a necessity for these type of fish. Typically you're fishing higher, darker, greener water. So 3/0 hook, 3-foot leader, good to go. Now I'm gonna show you the other setup here, and the other way to rig the same style setup, but just a different weight system. So this, our fish field float here, this is a 2-ounce float, okay? And you always wanna match your lead with your float. So this float is a 2-ounce float, and we have a 2-ounce weight. But the difference between this is an inline style weight, okay? So my other one has a dropper on it, and this one is actually tied inline. So this one's gonna sit real vertical in the water. Everything else is identical, but on this one, we have the jig, okay? So this is just like a steelhead jig. It's just a salmon jig. And at certain times, these can be super effective. So I always come down to the river with a bait rod and a jig rod, so you have both options to throw at the fish. Now, enough of the talking about the setup. Let's go see it in action and show you what kind of water and stuff we're looking for and how to actually bait up your hook with a sand shrimp and eggs. All right guys, so here it is. Here are all my baits cut up. I got sand shrimp and I got 3 or 4 different styles of eggs. And that's really important when I'm bobber fishing. I like to bring different cures and different types of bait, because sometimes they're gonna want a sweeter cure, sometimes they're gonna want a hotter cure, sometimes they'll want orange, sometimes they'll want red. So most important is come with a variety of eggs. If you don't have a variety of eggs, comes with the ones you have, because it's not, you know, fish are gonna eat. If there's fish in the water and you're putting your bait in front of fish, the odds are you're gonna get a bite eventually. So fish what you got. You don't have to have a million different kinds of eggs. So I'm gonna show you guys a couple different ways to rig a bait with the sand shrimp and eggs for fall chinook here. So grab your bait of choice. I'll go with some darker eggs here, but there's 2 different ways I like to rig my sand shrimp, and I'm gonna put 2 sand shrimp on for this exact purpose. But one of them is this, I'm just gonna go right through this bottom tail flap. There's a little flap here. If you fold the tail down, there's a little flap, and I just go up under that flap and I thread it about halfway up the shrimp, okay? And then you gotta be real gentle, but I work it over the top of the hook and pull that out and slide it up my line. So as you can see, it's halfway threaded up my line and the shrimp is sliding on my line there. So it's not actually fixed to anything. Next, I'm gonna grab my beta eggs here, okay? So I'm going with a little bit darker color egg on this time. And I'm just gonna run this egg through the skein a couple times, okay? So what that's gonna do is it's gonna hold that skein together on my hook. If you just hook it through your egg loop, if you just hook the bait through, just stick the egg loop around your bait, you're not gonna have much of the skein actually, much of the egg actually in the egg loop. So I like to wrap it around the hook a couple times, and then I'm gonna just pop my egg loop out here, and I'm gonna go right around the main beta eggs there. So it looks just like that. And then we'll slide that shrimp down, and this is what you got, a little shrimp cocktail. All right guys, so that's one way to rig your sand shrimp on there. Here's the second way that I do it. And I take that beta eggs, okay, it's slid up my hook at this point. I take the sand shrimp and I fold it in half, and I just run it through both the body and the tail, sliding it up around the hook. I take my egg loop here and I go right over the top of that shrimp, like so, and around the eggs, and then we pull it up nice and tight. Now you have your shrimp and eggs combo. And it's real important. Typically, this is a little bit smaller bait than I do. I try to hide the hook a little bit so the hook's not so exposed, you know, and so usually I use a little bit bigger bait, which would then hide that hook. But I'm gonna show you guys kind of the type of water we're looking for and make a few casts, and hopefully we can find one of these. So first thing first, when I approach a bobber hole and somewhere I'm gonna be bobber fishing, whether it's from the bank or from the boat, you wanna know your depth. If you're fishing a 6 foot deep hole, you don't wanna set your bobber at 8 feet. You wanna make sure that your bait is gonna be right in those fish's face. So if it's roughly 6 feet, I'm gonna try to fish my bobber at 5 feet, or where my bait would be in their face around 5 feet, 6 feet deep. So, and you're really trying to adjust depending upon where you think those fish are holding in the water column. So there's lots of real deep holes that you'll be fishing, like this one we're fishing now, at certain spots is 20 feet deep. Those fish could be holding at 8 or 9 feet or 10 feet or 12 feet. They're not always right on the bottom. So I like to start out at a comfortable depth, and is what you're looking for here. When I look at this hole, we got some fast moving water up here and we have an eddy down here, okay? So a little bit softer water. Typical bobber water is gonna be a little bit softer, a little bit deeper, okay? You don't want water that's just raging and ripping real fast, because your bait's just gonna get lifted up off the bottom. So we're gonna make a cast here. I'm gonna start up here where it's a little bit shallower, but as I drop down into this hole, it's gonna get a little bit deeper. So we're gonna make our cast here. Get it right over there on the wall. Now, this is the most important thing about bobber fishing, is if I just let my line lay on the water, that current is gonna suck my line down and drag my bobber like that. So really important to be mending your line. I try to keep as much line off of the water as humanly possible. So I'm just slowly letting that line out, keeping my rod tip angled up towards the sky. And as you can see, I'm just letting line off of the reel, just free spooling that line down the river. Okay, and I'm gonna get this thing, basically I'm trying to stretch my float out as long as I can get it. And once the bobber's below you like this, you're able to just almost free spool at that point because your line is going straight at you. So you're not having to mend a whole bunch. Okay, so that's one of the faster spots here. Let me reel in and I'll show you another little drift here. So this time we made a cast over on the deeper side, so I'm gonna take a few steps down. I'm gonna try a little bit on the inside a little bit more. And really the best thing about a bobber is you're able to cover a lot of water, okay? I'm able to cover from the top of the run all the way to the bottom of the run and just keeping that bait in front of the fish, right? So after this cast, if I don't get bit, I'll reel in, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper and I'm gonna slowly work my way down the water column. And then once I find a biter, then I'm gonna try to hone in on that biter. So if I get a bite at 8 feet, then I'll probably stay at 8 feet. If you get a bite, you know, as you're moving down, keep fishing where you're getting your bites at. So we'll reel in. The other thing about bobber fishing too, guys, is especially from the bank, when you're not moving, you don't wanna be letting your bobber go 200 yards downstream because it's really, really hard to get a good hook set on them. So fish a very manageable area. And if you gotta walk down a little bit to get to the next part of the run, then do so. So now I've made a few casts through there with that bait. I'm gonna switch my bait up and run something a little bit different through there. So this is a benefit of having lots of different styles of bait. So once again, right through the skein a few times. This one got dropped in the sand a little bit, it looks like. So once again, through the skein a few times. Grab a nice lively shrimp. And this time I'm gonna go right through the belly, right through the midsection, and then open up that egg loop and go around as much of the bait as you can and then cinch it down. Now you don't wanna cinch it so tight that you tear through the bait. You just wanna cinch it down just enough to where it's nice and snug on there. If you cinch it down too tight, you'll cut through your bait. But that's about as fishy as it gets right there. And see how the hook's still exposed, but kind of hidden with the, you know, you want to use the right size hook for the size of baits you're going to be fishing. You don't want a 6/0 hook and a tiny little bait. So here we go, guys. Let's try this one. I'm going to deepen this up a foot and slide my bobber stop down a foot. All right, so we readjusted our depth. We're going to try to stick this one right over on the wall. Oh, I like it, I like it. As the bobber's coming down to me, I'm just making sure I keep my line up off the water. And as you can see, it's dragging bottom there because I am set deeper than the bottom up here, but as it drops into the deep water, I want it to get down to where I think the fish are. So, and sometimes you're gonna be reeling in and not letting line out. Like that whole time it's coming down to me. Now once the bobber's past me, I'm gonna start slowly letting line out, not affecting the bobber. As you can see, my bobber is just running true. It's just sitting straight up and down. There's no pulling or pulling away from the bobber or me putting tension on it to rise my bait. I'm just letting the bobber free float downriver. And then if you get a little bit of line, I'll show you here. I put a little line on the water. If I get a little line on the water, I just lift my rod tip up and mend that line so it's straight to me. That way, if I get a bobber down, I can watch the bite. As the bobber goes under and disappears, I can engage my reel, point my rod at the fish, reel as fast as I can until I feel tension, and then set the hook. You don't want to be setting, that's the biggest thing I see, is guys will be bobber fishing and they get a bite, and they just set the hook. Well, they have all this line laying on top of the water, and what ends up happening is you just set the hook on a bunch of slack line and that's it. So it's really important to manage your line. Line management is a very, very important key to bobber fishing. Whether you're bobber fishing for salmon, trout, or steelhead, line management is very, very important. All right, guys, so I made a few passes through there with bait, no luck. So I'm gonna switch over and I'm gonna run the jig now. I'm gonna put the jig through the exact same water, give them a different look and a different option. Here we go. So I'm doing the same thing, same mending. I'm reeling as that bobber's coming to me. As that bobber begins to pass me and get tight on my line, I start to lower my rod tip, and then I begin to free spool the line, allowing that jig to work freely downriver, just like I was doing with the bait. All right, guys, I'm gonna make another cast, but we're gonna show you some of the footage from earlier this morning with this exact setup in action. So stay tuned, it's coming at you right now.
What's that? One?
That's a fish. Yep, fish. Oh, it's a nice one too.
Yeah, that's a good one. I got a fish.
Do you?
I got one.
You got one.
I got one. Yeah. There's one of them bucks.
He's actually a nice bright fish, man.
All right, guys, so another thing about bobber fishing is it's a great way to fish when there's a lot of people, or if it's a busy, crowded area, or even just you and a few buddies down in a hole. It's a great way to fish because you can cast, as long as the downriver guy casts first, which I'm gonna show you here how Dave will cast first and then I'll cast. You'll stay out of each other's way, and a lot of people can fish the same water. So it's a great tool to have. Dave's gonna make his cast, and then I'm gonna follow up. I'm gonna watch where Dave's cast is, and then I'm gonna follow in right behind Dave there. And we're gonna fish right through this. Now, the cool thing about bobber fishing is you can just mend over the top of each other. If I go to pass Dave, or if I'm gonna pass Dave or Dave stays on the inside, we can just lift our rod tip, go right over the top of each other, and you're fishing in unison basically. And it's a great way to cover water, get a few guys in a hole, and you can really cover a hole really well by bobber fishing. So guys, I hope you like the ins and outs of bobber fishing. I hope this helps you become more successful at bobber fishing. If you guys like this video, make sure you go down, give us a thumbs up, tap that subscribe button, turn on your bell notification, and we'll see you on the water.